All right, so here we go. Real talk for a minute. If you had asked me at a year ago, let's go back to January 2025, and you had asked me if I thought whether or not AI was being overhyped, I would have told you no. As a matter of fact, I think it's being underhyped. I think people do not realize how quickly things are going to change, how many industries are going to be affected, and the ways that those industries are going to be affected. And there's going to be a lot of great things that was going to come out of it. We're going to have cancer research, and AIs were going to solve other things like energy crisis. We don't need to worry about how we're going to the tax on the electric grid, right? Because as soon as we develop the AI, it's going to work on that problem and eventually solve it for us. We're not going to have to worry about it'll do bio research and all of these things, all these great things. And at the same time, it's going to make things like coding quicker. And we might even see entire industries start to be put out of business. Industries where there's a lot of rote memorization or basic math, like accounting. I could see a world early this year where there just weren't accountants anymore. They didn't need the number of accountants. So like the complexity was going to come down. And we can go back and look at a lot of different things. So this is an article back in 2003, I believe, on the positive social impact of AI. And they're just touting kind of how amazing it was going to be to live in this world where advanced science and research were happening, and where creativity, people were allowed to, instead of doing these, terribly, mundane jobs like data entry, that we were going to be freed up to pursue our creative interests. And it all sounded great. Here's another one. MIT, AI accelerates problem solving in complex scenarios. This is from 2023 as well. Talking about a new data-driven approach that could lead to better solutions for tricky optimization problems and all of these benefits. And you had companies, even back then at the time, companies like OpenAI talking about how they exist for the betterment of humanity. Right? Every one of these, it's kind of a Silicon Valley thing too, right? Is that if you've got a startup, especially if you're got a startup that's not going to make any money and is going to require you to spend billions and billions and billions of dollars in losses for decades before you ever hope to see a profit, it has to be about more than it has to be about more than power and control, right? It's got to be we've got to be saving humanity. Right. And that was the language that was used. Remember, there was a time not that long ago, OpenAI was a nonprofit. Problem is that didn't align very well with them wanting to make a lot of money off of it. And so they had to do a pivot, and they had to shift, and they went from being a nonprofit to being a for-profit. Now, all of a sudden, the risks are aligned. The people who are giving them money are happy, and large companies are willing to spend a fortune in order to, facilitate what could be the largest power grab on Earth. But what we saw over the last year is that things started to slow down, is that the models weren't changing the way we expected them to. Or we expected to see sort of like each model to become, infinitely better than the last one. And what we saw is that, hey, there's actually a limit to what these large language models can do. And that's agentic behaviors of these models, that there's a diminishing return, and that we've already trained it on almost all of the data, and it behaves in many ways like a human would behave. It has all kinds of faults and flaws, and it lies and it manipulates. It does all kinds of stuff that we didn't expect. And while we're starting to see the rate of change of these models slow down, but see, they're all still claiming the same things. They're saying, oh, we're going to cure cancer. We're going to solve our energy crisis, our energy issues. We're going to come up with a better model than capitalism, right? Some other form of exchange. We're going to need to start thinking through, what are we going to do when all of these people are out of work and they can't get a job? What's going to happen when we have 1,000 new musicians in a single city and none of them are making any money? Well, clearly, if those jobs that they were doing before are taken over by AI, well, that means that we need to do something. We need to provide them some sort of basic income. And where are we going to get that from? Well, we'll tax the companies that are using the AI. But something weird is happening, because we're not curing cancer. We're not solving any of society's biggest or most complex problems. At least not with the AI, the LLM AIs that we see from Claude, from ChatGPT, from Gemini, from these big contributors. The folks who have spent the most money on AI are the ones who are delivering the least change. Now, you do see some stuff, you do see some things in what we would not call, we're looking there. These companies, Gemini, let me back up here a minute. So these companies like Gemini, Apple, Meta, actually Apple's not really in it. But when you look at Meta, when you look at Google, when you look at OpenAI, when you look at Anthropic, these companies are all in a race for artificial general intelligence. And they're using LLMs to get there. And there's some question as to whether or not LLMs, you can even get a general intelligence with LLM or what it really is. Because if you looked 30 years ago and you showed them the tech we have today, they would say, oh, you've already hit it. You already have artificial general intelligence, right? But super intelligence is what these guys are after. They want an intelligence that is so far beyond human capability that it's not just smarter than any human, it's smarter than all humans combined. And that once they have this super intelligence, they will be the dominant force. And governments are looking at this too. Governments are putting a lot. This is why I think the gravy train for the LLM models, the big companies, that's not going to end. If the government needs to subsidize it, they will. If they need to, put $100 billion or $1 trillion into AI research to ensure that the Chinese don't get it first, they're going to do that. But the general intelligence is not nearly as appealing to me as sort of the niche intelligence. And the niche intelligence is where I think we could see the biggest gains, is not trying to create some sort of general super intelligence, but instead to get a model, some sort of AI. And they don't have to be large language models. There are other types of more traditional, what we consider traditional artificial intelligence. And the name escapes me, but it doesn't involve large language models. And we could put them to task looking at things like cancer research, looking at things like maybe it's organ growth and creating organs that will match people's own bio, so that you didn't risk, if you had a liver transplant or you had a heart transplant, your body rejecting that heart, because it would essentially be your heart just created new. There's lots of opportunities for this stuff. And we're not focused on any of that. Instead, what's happening right now? What are they building? OpenAI is going to start using erotica. This came from Axios a few days ago. I posted it onto LinkedIn. I couldn't believe how absolutely absurd this is. Let me read to you for just a minute. ChatGPT will allow a wider range of content, eventually including erotica, now that AI has completed work to enable the chatbot to better handle mental health issues. So they're claiming that they have solved the problem of mental health issues with the algorithm. There's 100% chance there's 100% chance that is not true, right? They haven't solved anything. They're in the middle of a lawsuit right now because some kid committed suicide after the AI encouraged him to do it. And that's not the only case of something like that happening or almost happening, right? But if you read down through this, it says, let me just read to you, because it's laughable. This move could boost OpenAI as it seeks to sign up customers for paid subscriptions, but it's also likely to increase pressure on lawmakers to enact meaningful regulations. It's not. They don't care. This is the thing. The government doesn't care how many people get hurt on the way to superintelligence. They only care that we get there, and that we get there before any of our competitors do. Because in their mind, the risk is total. If we are not the first, we will not be a dominant force in the world of the future. That it will be dominated by whoever comes up with this super intelligence. So they're not going to stand in the way. It says, Altman said in an X post, an OpenAI plans to allow ChatGPT to have more personality and fulfill previously blocked requests. Now that we have been able to mitigate the serious mental health issues and have new tools, we're going to be able to safely relax the restrictions in most cases. This is laughable. Now that we've been able to mitigate the serious mental health issues, you've got to be kidding me. Wow, when did this happen? This is amazing. And so we're going to do this. We're going to do erotica. Essentially, we're going to create the porn of the future. And then what else are we doing? Oh, we got Sora 2. Now we got AI slop. So we're creating an AI slop factory and porn for the future. Why? Where's the update on the cancer research? Where's the update on, all of these new promises that we were given that were going to help solve humanity? Instead, what we got AI slop and a new factory for that, because that's just what the world was asking for, right? Is another TikTok, but this time where nothing's real, it's all fabricated, and more porn. It's fantastic. And here's what I think is happening, okay? Here's what I think is going on. I think that the gravy train is starting to run out, at least on Wall Street. And Wall Street wants to see some type of return or some expectation of when they could see a return. Because the idea that they're going to lose, $100 billion over the next few years is not comforting to people who are making investments in this tech. And so I think that they started to get a little bit of pushback. And again, that's why you're seeing things. Let me pull this up here. I just downloaded this off the internet. Off the internet. Yeah, I did off the internet. Let me get my downloads here. And, where is it? I don't know where it went. Anyway, let me pull it up here. And basically, I want to show you the chart. Let's just see, round tripping OpenAI. Let me see if I can find the image here. Actually, I can show you guys here while I'm doing it. This is what I wanted to show you. So this is the way all of these companies are continuing to show revenue growth. And it should be illegal. It probably is illegal. But again, nobody really cares because everybody just wants the music to keep going. And so NVIDIA has a ton of money. Makes a ton of money. They make all the chips that are used in the servers that do the AI compute, and they've just been going gangbusters, and no stopping that. So they got lots of money. OpenAI doesn't have any money. Neither does Google. Has money, Microsoft has money, but OpenAI doesn't really. So here's what happened is that OpenAI has promised to spend $500 billion to buy NVIDIA chips. Where's it going to get that money from? It doesn't know because it doesn't have the money. It's never going to have the money. There's no profit. It's all losses. But they're going to pledge $500 billion over to NVIDIA. NVIDIA then pledges, $100 billion to OpenAI. Gives a portion of it back and is going to buy a bunch of stock. So it's essentially going to buy stock in OpenAI so that OpenAI can then turn around and give the money back to NVIDIA. Then Oracle is going to spend billions to buy NVIDIA chips. And OpenAI is going to just inked a $300 billion cloud deal with Oracle. Where does that $300 billion going to come from? Who knows? Turns out the way they're going to do it is Oracle is going to give OpenAI the money so that it can then give it back to Oracle. Now, Oracle doesn't have $300 billion either. So this is what's called round tripping. It's if I have $100 and I give it to you and you say, oh, thanks, I just made $100. And then you give it back to me and I say, oh, thanks, I just made $100. Now everybody looks like they're making money when all you're doing is just passing money around. You're just selling each other's stock and buying each other's stock, promissory notes, but it looks good. Everybody gets to write it down like it's new revenue. When in reality, nothing new's been created other than NVIDIA building chips and Oracle building the big server farms that are going to be needed in order to run all this AI, right? This is a big problem. The reason this is happening is because they're having trouble getting money on Wall Street. right? There's no other reason, because if they could go out and just raise another $100 billion, they would just do that. All this pushing money around is really designed to keep the music playing, keep everybody making money, keep everybody happy, and investors. So hopefully they can get to a point where they can do a little bit of revenue generation to prove that they do have some kind of model. And again, that's why when we go back and we look at OpenAI, their decision to do erotica and their decision to create the AI slop of the future, why would they be doing that? Well, one of the biggest reasons is those are known models for making money. The erotica industry online makes more money than any other industry. Still today, I have to look up the numbers, but if you look at the most visited websites on the internet, if you look at the top 10, I think the erotica industry has 5 of them, right? They're massive. And so it's easy. You know it's going to sell. All you got to do is put it together. A lot of lonely people out there. Social media has completely destroyed, human beings' ability to have decent conversations and discourse with one another. So why not? Let's get these guys out. Let's create some way for them to have communication. All these, incels that are sitting at home wishing that they had a girlfriend can have one, right? Let's push this out. And then let's create another social media site that we know will be able to monetize with a bunch of ads. The one thing that makes me hopeful is that if you can no longer tell what is real and what isn't on social media, if you can no longer tell whether the person that you are in conversation with is a human, whether the video that you're watching is actually real or not, this could spell the end of social media altogether. That's my one great hope, because I think of all of the things, negative things that technology has brought, and for all the positive things, I think probably the very worst thing that happened was Facebook, and then Instagram, and then all of the other social media sites. I think that they have done more harm to our psyche, to our relationships, than anything else. They have done great damage to human beings. And my hope is that maybe OpenAI just solved this problem. Because now I scroll through my videos and I see things and I'm like, I don't even want to watch this video because I don't know whether this is true, whether what I'm seeing is real. And that's only going to get worse as this technology becomes better. So let's finish this up by talking a little bit about business and where we're seeing returns on this. Because there was an article, you've probably seen it or at least heard about it. We come back here, Entrepreneur Magazine, nearly 95% of companies saw zero return on in-house AI investment, according to an MIT study. This is somewhat deceptive because they throw around this $35 to $40 billion, but most of that money came from like 3 companies, right? It came from like Google. It came from Amazon. I can't remember. I could dig into the study and pull it out. But the actual business community is not making massive investments in artificial intelligence, nor should they be, because it doesn't work as advertised. And I don't mean that in the sense that you can't use it. There's no reason or there's no use cases for AI. There are actually a ton of them. I use a ton of them in my business. I help my other clients build them for their businesses and build processes inside of their businesses that can be managed, at least in part, by artificial intelligence. But the promise that's being made, and the promise that was made back at the beginning of this year, is that AI would be able to do it all. They take the coders, they said, oh, you don't need to code anymore. Don't bother learning how to do it because we can do this thing now called vibe coding. And we don't need to learn how to do these skills anymore because those are all going to be handled. 100% of that's going to be handled by AI. And the truth is, it just can't. You've seen a lot of, now, if you read the articles, there's a lot of these companies, software companies in Silicon Valley, who are claiming that they are laying off developers because AI is taking over so much more of the workload, that they've been able to replace a lot of their coders and programmers with AI. The reality is a little bit more, mischievous Let's put it that way. After talking with some people who work in that world, they said, yeah, no, it's really not. It can do some boilerplate coding stuff, and it can assist the coder in some cases. In some cases, it's helpful. In some cases, it's not. So a lot of the coders who are going in and trying to get the AIs to write bits of code, what they're finding is that it's littered with vulnerabilities and all kinds of problems, and you absolutely cannot just turn something over. If you're building a little app for yourself or for your YouTube channel, and you just want to be like, oh, let me just vibe code this thing out. Now I've got a working model of my app that I can put on the App Store. If that's all you're doing, hey, that's fine. But if you're actually planning on delivering that, and that's going to be an app that exists now, you've got all kinds of security issues and problems that you're going to have to address, because I guarantee you that AI royally screwed some things up and left some massive vulnerabilities. So for any company that's worth their salt, that's doing something other than creating YouTube videos, they're going to have more than just a vibe coded app. All right. And so what's happening is, see, a few years ago, software developers were in short supply, and good ones. Still, even today, good ones are. But back then, especially. So if you had a startup that was growing and you were looking at it and you say, hey, maybe we need one software engineer right now to handle everything, but in 6 months, 8 months, we're probably going to need another software engineer. Well, what they were doing was they were saying, well, let's just hire two right now. If we can find two, let's get them both on right now, even though we don't have enough work for both of them right now. So you had, 2-3 software engineers in a company doing the work of one engineer. And then when, the money started to come out of Silicon Valley, and everyone was pivoting to AI, and if your thing didn't have AI in it, there was no way that anybody was going to give you money. Now, all of a sudden, everybody's putting AI into everything that they do, and they're starting to get rid of the extra weight. So those coders that really, you only needed one instead of 3, they're getting rid of 2 of them. But it looks really bad if you're trying to raise money and you're operating and you're letting people go and say, because we overestimated our growth and we overestimated the number of people that we were going to need to run this operation. That doesn't look good. What does look good is to say, we gained efficiency. We're using AI now to help our programming, so we don't need as many developers. So now we're going to save cost. See that? I think there's more of that happening than there is companies actually letting go of software engineers because AI is doing it for them. Like, trust me, I'm in this all day, right? So I know the severe limitations that AI has right now when it comes to coding. And that's just one area, okay? So I think a lot of the layoffs that you're seeing are the result of people they're just not growing as fast, or maybe they're having troubles inside the business, so they got to lay people off. And it just sounds better to say that they're being let go because of AI advancements. Now, there are some very good things that AI can help you do, but they're very niche. So you can think of it right now as like a helpful assistant that kind of screws up everything. It's kind of like that person that, they're worth having around because they do offload enough of the redundant, like painful things that I have to do every week to keep them around, but just barely. Because really, a lot of times they're more headache than they're worth. And I think that's where you've got to be thinking about this as a business owner. I do think you should be looking for ways to automate. I do think that you should be, and everyone on your staff should be looking at these tools and AI, these AI opportunities, and saying, hey, how can we leverage this in a safe way? Now, the easiest way to do that is through a company that's already developing it. So I do this podcast with Motion, and Motion has an incredible platform for product management, for documentation, for communication, and now they just rolled out AI employees that perform very niche functions inside of the business and can be custom tailored to whatever it is your business needs it to do, right? So they have that. And that means that you don't have to spend the millions and millions and millions of dollars in building out the systems for yourself. You can just go to a third party who has already put in that money, and you can start utilizing and seeing where it makes sense and where it's still, the technology just really isn't there. What I'm seeing into 2026, at least public facing. Now, we know that they're building AI models behind the scenes that they are not open sourcing to anybody, that they're not releasing to the public. Okay. But what I see moving into 2026 is that you're going to see a lot of this. You're going to see things start to slow down. You're going to start to see the rate of improvement of the models slow down. You're going to see the people's willingness, especially business owners' willingness to spend large amounts of money to automate agentically and instead go back to kind of a slower pace. I had a huge fear at the beginning of this year that AI adoption was going to happen within months, like in some industries within months. And I said I could see a scenario where that's the case. And that's scary because in any other technology revolution, it takes about 20 years for widespread adoption. And then once there is that adoption, then everybody's got it, right? Cell phones were a thing until all of a sudden Apple came out, and they came out with the iPhone with the touchscreen and the App Store. And then, it was like, boom, everybody's got to have one. Internet was the same way. Industrial Revolution was the same way. You could go back and look at any of these, any of these big revolutions that we had in advancements in technology. It takes about 20 years. And what scared me was I could see a scenario where it didn't take 20 years, it took 20 months. And what I'm finding is now today, people just are not, they're just not ready. The adoption rate is happening, but it's happening a lot slower than I had first feared. And again, I still think you need to be on top of it. I think you need to be looking at areas where you can add it to your business. But at least for now, as of October, I'm recording this on October 20th, I think that the risk of widespread unemployment and stuff like that's kind of overblown. And I also think that it's going to be a lot slower before we see that cancer research start to happen, because these companies are going to have to figure out a way to make money in order to fund the continued build out. That's assuming that we don't get a government that just comes in and says, no, we're just going to take care of all of this. This is too important. So you need $1 trillion, we'll give you $1 trillion. And I think that's the case that will be made, is that eventually these companies will run out of money and they'll have run out of places to go get money. And then the narrative will be, if we don't fund this, China's going to win. Kind of like the way when we had the housing collapse, we said we have to bail out all the banks because if we don't, it means the end of capitalism, right? Some question as to whether or not that was true, right? When 2020 hit, we're getting 3 weeks to slow the curve or whatever that was, that turned into like a year and a half, right? They always will try and use some sort of fear-based attack in order to convince the people that they should give up control, give up their money to these, large corporations who just have your best interest at heart, right? When in reality, that's just the easiest way to continue to line their pockets and continue to centralize control and power, right? So that's what I think is going to happen into next year. And we'll see. I could be wrong. I was wrong at the beginning of this year, right? But I'm coming to you now. I want to be straight with you, and I want to let you know where my head is at and what I've been seeing, because there's a massive opportunity over the coming years as this revolution and evolution takes place for you to stake your claim. Right? It's never been a better time for you to start a business. Never been a better time for you to be in technology. I think I'm studying programming right now, right? I still think it's a very valuable and viable way for you to make a living, because once you know how to do that, once you can speak the language of computers, the language of artificial intelligence, your whole world opens up. Right? So these are ideas. I'm not as concerned in talking to my kids that they're going to college. Like, do you really want to become an investment advisor? What's the point? We're not going to need those in the future. I'm less concerned for them. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's good that we are slowing down the rate at which we are adopting these technologies without fully understanding them, right? I don't think we're going to have any guardrails in terms of safety and security. I think that's still going to be the Wild West. But if you listen to OpenAI, they've already solved those concerns. No, there's no mental health concerns at all anymore. So we'll see. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for listening to my rant. If you like it, please subscribe, hit that bell icon, share it with a friend, and I'll talk to you soon.